You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button. I always like talking to Bill Connelly because he's smart and I think we always have good conversations. But I love the sometimes self-deprecating humor as well. So Bill has a piece up at ESPN.com right now where he's projecting the 2025 college football playoff bracket, and I won't bury the lead. He has Penn State winning the national championship, and so ESPN tweeted out the link, and so Bill quote tweets it with parenthetically mutes conversation immediately. That's so good. Bill's good enough to join us for a couple minutes. Hey man, how are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm really good. So, is there a part of you that you're just a giant troll, that you're just trying to kick the anthill?
Well, what's funny is this was a fun exercise and just kind of like going, creating rules for each conference title and coming up with the field and trying to set up the most interesting playoff matchups, and which, I enjoyed, I had Brian Kelly versus Notre Dame, and that was all fun. And then I realized, oh, crap, now I got to actually pick games. So it was like the very last thing I did. I had no preconceived notion of who I was going to pick, and then that becomes the social media headline, basically.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's how it goes a lot of times whenever, you're filling out a March Madness bracket, too, right? You don't intend to get somewhere. You just start picking upsets, and you're like, oh, I didn't know I was going to end up with this game. And then you look, and you got Central Connecticut State in the Sweet 16. How did that happen? I don't know. That
was exactly it. I had Notre Dame and Penn State in the semis. I'm like, oh, it's more fun when there's revenge in the second matchup. And then I had Penn State Georgia. I'm like, man, I have questions about Georgia. And then I realized I'd pick Penn State to win the whole thing.
Do you honestly think Penn State can win the whole thing?
I think they can. I mean, they're definitely going to be a contender. They were very good this year. Andy Connelly is a great offensive coordinator. He's going to have a better lay of the land. They just hired the best defensive coordinator in the sport, as far as I'm concerned. So they're absolutely top 3, 4, 5. But yeah, I mean, they'll have a chance to win the title. I just didn't realize I was going to give them the official endorsement here.
Yeah, for those that missed it, Penn State plucked away Knowles, the defense coordinator from Ohio State. It's a big get. I mean, from the national champion. That's something. By the way, I also love when I get to read something from someone who makes me go grab a dictionary to look up a word. So I had to go look up heuristic. Yeah, I had to look. What is that? I'm looking it up. It just says plural noun. A heuristic process or method.
It's a fancy word for rules. Let's just create some rules.
Okay.
So that was basically what I was going for there.
Okay, what were your rules then putting together your playoff?
So for each conference title, I basically tried to come up with something that kind of ties recent years together. So for the SEC, to win the SEC, you have to either be Kirby Smart or a coach who has beaten Kirby Smart in a previous season, like Ed Ogeron had, like Nick Saban had. So that basically gives us Georgia, Alabama, or Ole Miss. Those are the only teams eligible for the SEC title this year because of previous years. So then I just picked from that batch. And that's what I kind of did. Clemson, the ACC, it was kind of the same way. Clemson either wins it or gets knocked out by the team that does win it later in the regular season. Big 12 is just whoever won the close games is going to lose them, and whoever lost them is going to win them. And so I just flipped everything around and had Utah over Kansas in the title game. So try to keep it pretty fun. And then at the end of it, pick Penn State.
Well, you ended up with some interesting matchups. For the people here that'll be most interested, you did have in a first-round matchup 10th seeded LSU, so as an at-large, at 7th seeded Notre Dame, which, as you mentioned, would be Brian Kelly against his former team, which would be an awful lot of fun. What are your feelings on the Tigers coming off what is categorically a disappointing season, but heading into one that feels pretty big for LSU?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easier to talk yourself into LSU in 25 than I think it was in 24. Let's put it that way. I mean, Nussmeier, probably isn't the best quarterback in the country, but he's top 10. He's going to have at least one very good receiver and probably a lot more than that. And excuse me. And so the defense is going to be probably the question mark again, but I like Blake Baker. He's going to have two awesome linebackers if healthy. He's going to have just about the best linebacking tandem in the country if healthy. I like the portal work just in general. It seems like they've added some really nice depth there this year and probably could have done a better job of that in previous years. But I mean, you just kind of step back and you realize there's not a lot of huge question marks here. And I definitely think that could be a top 10 and potentially higher kind of team.
Bill Connelly's with us. You'll get him on Twitter or X at ESPN_Bill C. He's got a fun exercise. It's a mock playoff for 2025. As you mentioned, he does have LSU in it. But 4 SEC teams, Georgia, the 1 seed. We mentioned LSU. The 2 in the middle will probably get a lot of attention, with Alabama as the 5 seed, Texas as the 6 seed. There is, I don't want to be too loose with my wordage, with my verbiage, but there is a little excuse making for Kalen DeBoer's struggles in year 1. How much are you actually buying that it's a real good bounce back opportunity for Bama?
It's a massive bounce back opportunity. We obviously need to see what we don't know what we're gonna see at quarterback. I should put it that way. And you know, if Simpson wins the job, that's probably not a great sign. You probably want one of the younger guys to win it. But no, I mean, overall, it was funny. I got to the end of the year and my SP Plus rankings, Ole Miss was number 2 and Alabama was number 4 because each of them suffered 2 of the flukiest losses of the season. So, like, I'm going to lean onto that. I certainly didn't like the way that offense looked at the end of the season, but I've loved just about every other Kalen DeBoer offense that I've ever seen. So I'm going to assume he and his staff didn't forget everything they've ever learned, and therefore their ceiling's still going to be really high. Basically I had to pick 3 SEC teams from that batch, and I wasn't real convinced about any of them, but I think I was more comfortable going with Alabama than I was Ole Miss, who has a lot of rebuilding to do. A&M has a lot of rebuilding to do on one side of the ball. Tennessee has a lot of rebuilding on another side of the ball. Florida still got the schedule, so I went with Bama.
You have Texas, but I think what's more interesting than having Texas in there is who you have Texas playing, and that's North Carolina and their new head coach, Bill Belichick. So, Bill, the reality is I think a lot of people here, and I'm throwing myself in that number as well, we know Bill Belichick said UNC. I can't tell you a lot about that roster, that situation in North Carolina otherwise. So was this just part of the fun exercise, or is there a real opportunity for Bill Belichick in year 1 there in Chapel Hill?
Probably just part of a fun exercise.
Okay.
I backed myself in the corner and decided to go with the fun option. Basically, I had an Indiana Memorial out of nowhere transfer-laden turnaround bid, basically, that I had to give to somebody, either a team with a first-year coach or a team coming off of a disappointing season that's loading up on transfers. Honestly, of the teams in this batch, number one, there were barely any power conference teams that changed coaches, so I didn't have a lot to choose from there. North Carolina was certainly one of them. Scott Frost at UCF, I guess. But then I noticed that, I really like what Oklahoma's done in the portal as well. And, I think with the offensive hires that Venables made, getting in John Mateer, I could see a major turnaround there happening. But I can never – this is Indiana. This is an Indiana Memorial pick. I couldn't pick Oklahoma, a blue blood, to be Indiana. I had to get a little weird. It had to be something completely unexpected, and I realized I had a chance to set up Belichick versus Manning in the playoffs, so I did it.
That's so good. Bill, there is the component, right, that we have a 1-year sample. So how do you really what do you really extrapolate from a 1-year sample? But, right. We watched SMU go from irrelevant since the Pony Express death penalty to in year 1 in the 12-team play in the playoffs. So, should we believe that SMU is an outlier? Or, I know you're correlating to Indiana, but Indiana, SMU is an outlier? Or might we see teams like that actually crash the party every year because of the way it's set up?
No, I think, with the pretty wide variety and schedule strength that we're going to have with these enormous conferences. SMU was kind of borderline top 25 heading into the season. Nobody was talking about playoff, obviously. But I do think basically anybody in that top 30, 35 range that has just the right schedule and can get to like 11-1 or something, there's a lot of teams that could pull that off. North Carolina is probably not one of them, admittedly. But, no, just in general, it is kind of, we're going to do these exercises every time there's a new set of rankings out about, here's what the bracket would look like with these rankings. But we almost have to kind of just reserve a spot or two for surprise stories that catch fire at just the right time. And honestly, that's great. That's like my favorite part. SMU making it, Arizona State catching fire, Indiana being the story of the first, 3 quarters of the season. Those were awesome stories, and I thought it brought a lot of life to college football.
I agree completely. More football is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. More teams having a chance is a good thing. Do you think, last thing, and this is sort of not directly correlated with the exercise you did, but after 1 year, if you could tweak or change the playoff format, what would you suggest, or what would you do if you were the college football grand poobah?
Well, I know everybody I assume after this coming year, we're going to have just a straight 12 seeds. We're not going to have the 4 conference title buys anymore. I didn't mind it at all. I liked the emphasis that put on conference titles. And, for fans of SEC or Big Ten schools that were complaining about it, I'm like, well, that's why you make all the money. You're already getting so many other advantages. Here's just one advantage we're going to throw to somebody else. But I get that that's going to go away. My will is not going to keep that from happening. But I did. The other thing that everybody talked about that I did absolutely agree with is those home games were amazing in the first round. That we uncovered a new substance of playoff home field advantage, and it felt like the most powerful substance we've ever discovered. I want that in the quarterfinals too. So that's my biggest thing. I mean, among other things, like putting in number 13 versus 15 in like the Cotton Bowl or whatever is more. You're more likely to remember who won the Cotton Bowl in a given year than just having it be a quarterfinal. So let's make those home games and make them more memorable. And I don't know if it'll happen because I know bowl people still have a decent amount of pull, but it absolutely should.
Yeah, I agreed. If they can make the money, they got to figure out the money, Bill. It's whenever they figured out the money is when they expanded the playoff. Whenever they figure out how to disassociate from the bowl games and make the money work, then I agree with you. We'll see it. But either way, college football is never boring, even here at the end of January. Bill Connelly, I'll get him on Twitter at ESPN_Bill C, and go read his projection how the 2025 college football playoff will shake out. It's a fun exercise. Bill, we always appreciate a couple of minutes, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.